Hi everyone. Today we're talking about DCA, dollar cost averaging, with Reed from Swan Bitcoin. If you're interested, visit coincompass.com/swanbitcoin to set up a free account.
Welcome to the Bitcoin Basics podcast with your hosts, Faris and Gordon from coincompass.com, enabling you to safely buy and securely store your Bitcoins. All resources are in the show notes and description, including our disclaimer. Visit bitcoinbasicspodcast.com to subscribe and discover other free content.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Basics Podcast. We have a very special guest this evening, which I'll get Gordon to introduce later. So I'm Ferris, and we'll do a proof of time. So it is Wednesday, 12th of August, almost at 20 past 5 p.m. UTC time. And the price of Bitcoin is $11,540 US dollars. And the block height is 643,393. Gordon, who do we have with us today, tonight, this evening, this morning?
Thanks, Faris. Well, it's definitely this evening or early morning for me. Today we have Reed Womack. Actually, I should have asked you that before I actually introduced it, if that was the correct
pronounced it perfectly.
Oh, fantastic. So we have Reed Womack from Swan Bitcoin, but we'll get to that in a minute. Reed, how about you introduce yourself, how you got to Bitcoin, and perhaps what was your first sort of experience in buying Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Reed, and I work at customer support for Swan Bitcoin, which is currently a US only Bitcoin exchange that helps people save in Bitcoin. And sort of we pride ourselves on being the easiest way to save money in Bitcoin. It's very simple, so easy your grandmother could do it. And I'm actually a relative newcomer to Bitcoin. So I first became interested really in the fall of 2018, so less than 2 years ago, and have since it's consumed my life in a great way. I've gone down the rabbit hole. I've been writing a newsletter about Bitcoin, trying to get friends and family to invest in it. And
the Bitcoin Buddha.
Yeah, and I think I actually first bought Bitcoin on Robinhood, a sort of a Bitcoin derivative product that Robinhood has. And then shortly thereafter, and so that was winter of 2019, and then shortly thereafter have bought some on Coinbase, and now I've very much moved away from Coinbase because of their high fees, and currently save Bitcoin weekly through Swan Bitcoin, and then occasionally do some smash buys on Cash App. So that's my short story of how I got into Bitcoin. So thank you for having me on. It's good to be here.
You're absolutely welcome. And by the way, that was a test to see how security conscious you were, because of course the correct answer is I don't have any Bitcoin. For Bitcoin.
First rule of Bitcoin.
or a boating accident. They're the two answers. Both accepted. So I had a look at some of the other podcasts, and I certainly don't want to rehash them, but a couple of interesting things. You were actually introduced to, well, I guess got exposure to Ethereum, and you were talking about, seeing Vitalik with Putin, I think it was. And so why Bitcoin and not Ethereum? Why not invest in Ethereum and some of these?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think a lot of people new to the space, new to sort of cryptocurrency space, end up hearing a lot of different marketing pitches from a lot of different coins. And Bitcoin is now by far the oldest and has the largest market cap and the largest community at this point. But there still are a lot of other coins that people hear about. And I got sort of almost more exposed to Ethereum early on because one of my best friends had actually a Bitcoin chainalysis company, really, that he was starting up. And he came to Denver to go to Denver, and I just remembered talking to him about ETH because at the time I was not really involved in Bitcoin at all, and there just seemed like a crazy amount of cool energy in Ethereum and that community. So that was my first exposure, but really upon researching more, you sort of start to see the ways that cryptocurrencies aren't like equities. They are a currency, and once you start looking at cryptocurrencies as a currency, it's hard not to go towards the strongest, the largest, and the one that is most likely to, in the end, dominate. And so I think by that spring, I had sort of become less interested. After 2 months in Ethereum, I realized that there were a lot of promises that weren't fulfilled, and a lot of the toxicity of the Bitcoin maximalists, the sort of shooting down Ethereum ideas and pointing out its flaws, those started to percolate in my mind. And so by last spring, I became mostly interested just in Bitcoin. And then essentially by the summer, I went further down, did even more research, and just started reading Austrian economics. And at that point, I became a maximalist and no longer hold anything other than Bitcoin, and no longer advise people to hold anything other than Bitcoin, and encourage people to sell other things for Bitcoin. Not that other things can't make money in the short term, just long term for risk management, it doesn't make sense to be holding the altcoin hot potato.
Yeah, no, we can agree with you more. And it sounds like when you're talking about Austrian economics, for me, I think the aha moment for me with Bitcoin was basically the supply and demand, understanding that it's market capped. It's supply capped at 21 million, and then just looking into the weeds, and that so for me, Gordon told me about Bitcoin, I think 2012, and I kind of did what most people do. Okay, whatever you're talking about. So it was like Second Life money or something at that time. Yeah. But then I started spending, as you say, go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. I was spending like 4 hours a day learning about this thing. For me, I really appreciate it from an economic and financial standpoint, whereas someone like Gordon's looking at it from the technological standpoint. Yeah. One thing I want to mention, Raid, we get very jealous of you guys living in America because we don't have access to Robinhood, Cash App, all that kind of stuff. So can people living outside the US invest in Swan Bitcoin or use Swan Bitcoin to buy Bitcoins, and how they go about doing that?
Good question. Yeah. So right now, the US has a lot of different ways to buy Bitcoin. Some direct Bitcoin, and then other things that sort of give you exposure to Bitcoin, but you don't really own the actual Bitcoin. So Robinhood is a good example of that. Or GBTC, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, is sort of a derivative product of Bitcoin. And we at Swan, we allow you to actually own your own Bitcoin, and we try and guide you towards self-custodying, taking it out from our custody and putting it in your own hardware wallet, which we think strengthens the network in the long term, and helps our users avoid any bad actors. Us or somebody else, just encouraging them to take ownership. But right now we are just focused on the US. So we can only sell Bitcoin to people who have a US social security number, a US bank account. And it's not that we don't want to one day expand elsewhere. We're just trying to sort of start with that narrow niche. And it's probably for the next 2 years, at least, we're just going to be focused on selling to the U.S. market. Like, in our view, it is the largest market in the world, and so there's just so much room to grow, even though there are more competitors in the U.S. than elsewhere. If you live outside of the U.S., there are a number of good options. So, in Australia, there's Amber app, and they're expanding to Europe soon. Bitter, we hear, is starting back up again in Europe with more KYC, but they should be running soon. In the UK, there's CoinFloor. They're a Bitcoin-only exchange. Canada has Bull Bitcoin. You can always do peer-to-peer networks like BISC or local Bitcoins all over the world. And then if you do want to get involved in Swan, we have a program called Swan Force, which is a referral program. So even though we can't sell Bitcoin to you directly, if you have a bunch of friends, family, or know people in the US, and you get them to sign up through your link, you can end up earning 25% of the fees that we make. So our fees are actually a lot lower than Cash Apps and Coinbase, roughly around 1%, depending on your plan size. And you could end up earning 25% of those. So, roughly 0.25% of what your friends or family end up buying through the US. So that's sort of how we're trying to, expand internationally, or at least get international people involved. Right now, the banking system internationally doesn't allow for pull ACH transfers, and that's sort of like our main bread and butter of how we get money in. Is that we set up a system where people put in their bank account information, then we can just pull automatically every week from them. And I think a lot of international systems, the European banking system in particular, you have to push, which means that you have to accept every single time somebody tries to take money from you. You have to click a button and say, sure, I agree. And so that's just one extra hurdle, and a different back end that we would have to build for other banking systems. So right now, just US focused, but we are incorporating referrals, or international people can have referrals through us for their American friends.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share so we can find others like yourself.
I was really encouraged to hear that so you want your customers to move to self-custodianship, to hold their own Bitcoins, because that's something we advise on the show. And,
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And I remember having conversations with people who say, I bought some Bitcoins, and I'd ask them, where are they? Well, what do you mean? I went to a website and I bought them. I'm like, well, you haven't actually bought them. And Gordon came up with a good term, was like, you're renting them. They own them. So,
yeah.
So, because I saw on your website, you do a methodology of hot storage and cold storage, depending on the customers, I suppose, how often they're getting in and out, or how do you determine to move from a hot wallet to a cold storage wallet, and who then teaches a customer how to use a cold storage wallet?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as background for beginners, hot wallets are connected to the internet. So their keys, they can sign transactions quickly as a result of being connected to the internet. And cold wallets are disconnected from the internet, so they take longer and are often a manual process of sending transactions. Hot wallets are exposed to a little bit more security risk through hackers or malware. Cold wallets tend to be much more secure. So actually, up until 2 weeks ago, we were purely on a cold wallet system. So everyone was on cold wallets, which super safe. However, it meant that withdrawals sometimes had a day or 2 days to go through. And we sort of decided that wasn't a great user experience. And so we've moved now and added hot wallet capabilities. So people who buy Bitcoin and then immediately withdraw are opted into hot wallets. And then people who buy Bitcoin and don't have a pattern of withdrawals are opted into cold wallets. And so we try to guide people toward withdrawing. And in our sign-up flow, and we end up towards the end, encouraging users to add an automatic withdrawal. But if people aren't comfortable yet storing their own keys, that's totally fine. We can store them for you, and it's actually stored in your name at a trust company. So we partner with Prime Trust, and all the Bitcoin that is in your account is stored legally in your name at that company in its own account. So that's that company, Prime Trust, is sort of best-in-class security provider, best-in-class custodian. They provide services for Binance and a bunch of other exchanges. But we're actually the only company that it's the Bitcoin stored with Prime Trust is in your name rather than in Binance's name. So if you store Bitcoin on Binance, chances are, or Binance.us, chances are Prime Trust is holding that Bitcoin, but it's in Binance's name. If you store Bitcoin with us, Prime Trust is holding that Bitcoin, but it's in your name. So if for instance, our company ever goes down or Binance ever goes down, and you go to Prime Trust, you're never going to be able to get out your Bitcoin if it's stored under Binance's name. Whereas with our model, if we ever, for whatever reason, I don't anticipate this, but for whatever reason, our company goes out of business, that's fine. You could go to the trust company and it's in your name. And so that really stops us from rehypothecating Bitcoin. Like we just can't do it because it's not in our name. So we can't touch your Bitcoin. Like you have to validate every transaction out. You have to agree to, and that's actually pretty cool as you get further down the rabbit hole and you recognize the likelihood of companies rehypothecating Bitcoin. It becomes more important, or you realize the importance of banking with companies or custodying with companies who make that impossible. If you choose to custody with a company, versus custodying with a company who can do that easily. Someone like BlockFi or Celsius or potentially even Binance.
So you mentioned one of my trigger words, rehypothecation. Perhaps you could go into that, Reid. But I guess just taking a little bit of a step back, because there may be some people who are sort of new to Bitcoin and they're not sort of used to the buzzword bingo. Someone has say $10,000 and they're in the US. Why shouldn't they just transfer $10,000 to Coinbase and buy Bitcoin? Give us your elevator pitch for Swan Bitcoin.
No, it's a good question, because Coinbase at this point is the biggest name in the business, and so a lot of people, when they think about buying Bitcoin, they go there, or at least they've heard of that company. Unfortunately, Coinbase has over the last 7 years or so done a number of things that haven't supported the system or Bitcoin. And some of those are adding a lot of other different cryptocurrencies that are backed by venture capitalists, but ultimately end up dumping to zero. So Coinbase has made a fair amount of money by listing projects that are pre-mined and are venture backed, and then selling those to retail investors who don't know any better. And then the venture capitalists profit and the retail investors end up footing the bill and losing a lot of money. And so over the last 7 years, they've done this repeatedly, and made a lot of money off of sort of miseducating their users into buying these altcoin projects. So that's one reason why they're not a great company. Another more compelling reason for their users is their fees are super high. It's like 2.5% or so to buy Bitcoin through them. So there are a lot cheaper options out there. Cash App is a lot cheaper, and we are much cheaper than either of those. So if you want to save money, if you want to save money on your Bitcoin, you probably shouldn't use Coinbase. Aside from them miseducating you and duping you into buying altcoins, they'll just charge you outrageous fees. So.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, we recently just did a Coinbase and Binance comparison podcast, and if you're not in the US, the fees for buying Bitcoin on Coinbase is 4% because your only option is to use your credit card.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's super high.
And in fairness, most exchanges are the same, Reid. I mean, you go to the exchange and you want to buy Bitcoin, and you're like, hang on, Bitcoin's $11,000. There's this other thing called Bitcoin Cash. That's I don't even know what that is now. I don't look at the prices. So you got Bitcoin Cash, and then you got Bitcoin SV and this and that. And so, in fairness to other exchanges, they're kind of the same. So
yeah, absolutely. I think that the difference, or at least the way I view the difference, is other exchanges are clearly casinos. They're honest about being casinos. They list everything. Something like Binance or Kraken lists everything, and they don't spend their time educating their users about the future of XLM or about the future of Cardano. It's purely a trading platform. And I think for me, that's not the business I want to be in, but casinos make good business. If you want to go trade Cardano and Tezos, right? But it feels a little misleading to me to spend so much time educating users, or really miseducating users about the future of these altcoins when their primary purpose is speculation. So that's the one difference I see between Coinbase and Binance. The business model is ultimately the same. It's just whether you're being honest about the business model. And companies like Swan and even Cash App or River Financial, CoinFloor, Amber App, we're in just a totally different business model. Like that's not how we're making money. We're not making money on trading fees, and we're not encouraging users to really like overtrade, getting in and out of the market and then charge them fees for that. So totally different business model using the same Bitcoin for different purposes.
The same Bitcoin? You're not renting it out to 5 other customers at the same time? So if someone's decided, they're like, okay, I've decided, yeah, I do want to buy Bitcoin. I'm not going to get distracted by all these shiny unicorns and other kinds of stuff. I want to buy Bitcoin. Why shouldn't they just then find a reputable Bitcoin exchange and transfer their $10,000? Like, do you want to go through the process of what DCA is, and but perhaps even more practically, how does that actually work, Leonard? Going through step by step.
Yeah. So in the U.S. exchange, there are a bunch of ways to buy Bitcoin. And some of them are much more complex than other ones. And some of them allow you to own the actual Bitcoin like we do. And some of them are very easy to use, but you don't actually end up owning the Bitcoin, like Robinhood. So we use ACH transfers, which are very simple. Like all you have to do is put in your bank account information, and then we periodically pull it once a week. We are actually increasing it shortly to twice a week so people can DCA even more often. But that is just such a simple user experience, because they don't have to end up wiring money, which can be challenging, and they don't have to end up timing the market. So oftentimes when you go to other exchanges, you have to wire money in, make sure you got the routing information right for the bank wire, so you didn't just wire it into oblivion, and then cross your fingers that the wire shows up, and then purchase Bitcoin. You can either market buy Bitcoin or set some sort of level that you would buy it at. If price drops below this point, you buy, or price rises above some point, you buy. And that's a great option for people who have a lot of experience in financial markets and a lot of experience in the traditional system, or a lot of experience trading. But for most people, it's not really worth your time, frankly, because you have better things to do than most people have better things to do than stare at charts and try and wire money every week or every few days into Kraken or into Coinbase. And so ACH pulls tend to be simpler than and more. You can sort of set them and forget them, at least with our company. And so that's why that's been our primary focus. We are ultimately going to add wires, but it's sort of going to be just an add-on feature for people. We're still going to maintain ACH pulls as the primary funding mechanism, just because it allows people to set it up once and then forget about it, and never have to worry about when they're buying Bitcoin, how they're buying Bitcoin ever again. It's so
stressful.
Yeah,
pick the top and the bottom. It's like, I don't know where the top and the bottom is.
And people do it wrong. Everyone, or 98% of people do it wrong. Actually, according to Arthur Hayes, it's 99% of people lose as traders and 1% win. And I used to think that I could do it right. And, I've been buying Bitcoin now for a year and a half, and disproportionately when the price goes up, I buy then, and disproportionately when the price goes down, I don't buy. And I consider myself a very smart person. I also know that this is a long-term play, right? I'm like I'm in this for 30 years, but I still sort of get caught in the emotions myself. And this allows DCAing sort of allows you to take the emotions out of it, so that you can buy when the price is low, buy more actually when the price is low, and then the price goes up and you end up buying a little bit less, but you don't get caught up nearly so much in the emotional swings, which for some crypto traders is fun. Like that's their life. These emotional swings of, price is going through 12,000. But for most people, their time is better spent with their family and working at their job than caring about the Bitcoin price. So hopefully once they understand enough of the fundamentals of it, they realize the long-term upward trajectory of it. DCA really is the option for 99% of people.
And it's a really good way to get into Bitcoin too. You don't have to sort of spend $10,000 with a transfer or something like that. You can just, I don't know. What's your minimum amount? Can you do like a $10 or a $20?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. We do $10. You can do $10 a week. We actually used to be able to do $5 a week as well, so even cheaper. And we still have a $10 monthly option, so $120 a year. Very, very easy way to start building your position in Bitcoin.
Wow.
That's really encouraging to hear, because I remember, when I was first telling people about Bitcoin, which was late 2016, and a few people came up to me, and I just repeated what I was hearing from other people, which is just buy it and don't look at the price for 5 years. And a couple people followed my advice, and they got in at around 3,000, saw the price swing to 20,000. Other people traded in and out, and the stress levels between the two could not be more fragmented. So and also even though I was saying to people buy and hold, I wasn't doing that. I was trading it because I thought I know what I'm doing. So something like Swan Bitcoin would have been great for me back in 2016, because I would have followed my own advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a really helpful feature for 99% of the average Joes in the world who aren't traders, don't have 10 years of trading experience. Those people are not going to beat the market, and those people are best served by just automatically DCAing in. The increases, the increases in price are actually helpful for sort of driving people towards learning more about Bitcoin. At least we found that when prices go up, way more people are engaged, way more people are wondering, like, why is this thing going up in price? And they start digging into the fundamentals more. But eventually, the end game of understanding Bitcoin is DCAing. And pretty much everyone I've talked to who's ever studied it in serious ends up, maybe it takes a year, maybe it takes 5 years, but they end up realizing that DCA is the way to accumulate Bitcoin.
So DCA into Bitcoin, get your Bitcoin onto your hardware wallet, and then what?
And then, well, that's just the beginning, because then you start running your own node, then you can start experimenting with Lightning Network. But for me, at least, just getting Bitcoin into as many hands as possible is my mission, and trying to get as many people as possible interested in Bitcoin.
Fantastic. I mean, that's awesome. So obviously, Swan Bitcoin is US-centric, at least for the moment, and you've mentioned some others in some other countries. I think Faris and I will have to follow up on those as well. Is there anything that we've missed or we haven't asked you about DCA, beginning investing, any best practices or tips and tricks or anything like that?
No, I think that's about it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I could go on and talk about your experience at a monastery in Thailand, I think it was, but that's perhaps for another podcast. Faris, have you got anything else?
No, thank you very much, Reed, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. And we'll make sure that we set up links for everyone to find you guys at Swan Bitcoin. What about yourself, Reed? If people want to follow your work, how do they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Reed Womack, And if you want to sign up for Swan Bitcoin, if you go to swanbitcoin.com/Reed Womack, you can actually get $10 of free Bitcoin. So, yeah, sign up, start DCAing, and start accumulating a little bit of Bitcoin.
Thanks for watching or listening. Please visit coincompass.com/free to register to our socials and discover other free content. Subscribing, liking, and following helps this content remain ad-free. Until next time.